to Voodoo Whiskey Gaming, and this is my late review of Dark Cloud 2. I played it on the PS4 because it was originally a PS2 game and now is available on the PS4. So let's start with the story. You play as Max, who is just kind of living a quiet life in a quiet town, and then obviously things get way more complicated for him. He ends up meeting Monica, who is a time traveler who has gone back in time to try and fix the future, and Max is there to help her by rebuilding the world because some stuff has gone down and it needs to be fixed. Dark Cloud 2's story is far more in-depth, there's a lot more going on, it's just better told. Pretty much everything about the story is better than that of Dark Cloud 1. Let's get into the audio, which is better than Dark Cloud 1, from the music to the sound effects to the voiceover work. Okay, well, some of the voiceover work is not astounding. I mean, a lot of it's not great. This was the PS2 era, but there is voiceover work, which that's a huge step up from the previous game. I like the music. Overall, they've kept it more simplistic, which is kind of in line with what Dark Cloud 1 did, and I like it. The music always fits with where you are in the game, in the world. And the sound effects, I mean, this was the PS2 era, so the sound effects aren't going to be crazy over the top, but they are good and they do work with what's there and the cartoonier nature of the game. Onto the gameplay mechanics and whatnot. This is a third-person action RPG dungeon crawler world builder. I feel like that pretty much covers the bases. It very much follows in the footsteps of the first Dark Cloud in that most of the action takes place in dungeons, and they are randomly generated dungeons, which is always fun, so if you go back, you're not going to know the map. One major change that they made this time around is both Monica and Max have ranged weapons as well as melee weapons, so you're not bouncing between characters just to get a ranged weapon, etc. Having mentioned that, you can swap between Monica and Max and other characters when you are in the dungeon. You also get a thing called a ride pod, which is basically a mech, which is almost awesome, except for if you're running around as Monica, it's not as easy to switch over to the ride pod as I would have liked. You can either stay in the game and switch over to Max and then over to the ride pod, or you can jump into the menu and go to a couple other menus and then switch the ride pod. And it's a little bit kind of a pain in the ass, quite frankly. I wish they had figured out a better way of doing it, but it is what it is at this point. And as for the other major Dark Cloud mechanic, the Georama, that is back, but unfortunately, unlike the dungeons that are done just as well, if not better than the original Dark Cloud, the Georama system is unneededly complicated, it's poorly guided, and it's just not as fun to play around with as it was in the first game. In the first game, you would find the items you needed while exploring the dungeons, you'd bring them out to the town that they're supposed to be in, you'd place them, you'd talk to the owners of said houses and whatnot, and you'd get some guidance of what they need, where they want to be, etc. You don't really get that in this game. It just doesn't feel as satisfying. There is a bit of a guide, but it doesn't feel as well done as in the previous game. It's convoluted and just unenjoyable. It's very clear that they were trying to expand upon what it was, but unfortunately by doing so, they made it less fun than it had been. They did stick with the more unique leveling system in this game. You don't so much level your character as their weapons. And they did take away the punishment for accidentally breaking a weapon, which was nice because you'd work your ass off to build this really nice sword in Dark Cloud 1, and then you wouldn't repair it in time, it would break, and it'd just be gone forever. Whereas in Dark Cloud 2, when it says a weapon is broken, it's not really broken. You can just apply the repair item, and voila, you can use it once again, as if it had never broken at all. You also level up your weapons by spectrumizing, in this game, items, and then applying them to the weapon. It's a whole thing, and I actually like the way it works. I think it's a good system, and you can evolve your weapons based on leveling up certain attributes, so it's pretty cool. That's pretty well guided. I just wish the Georama worked as well. As for the controls are very clunky. I mean, that's not surprising. This was a PS2 era game, so they didn't always have the controls mastered back then. That being said, I do think the controls work well for the game, but you do have to know going into it that they're not going to be like modern third-person RPG action controls. And then lastly, the graphics. I actually like the visuals in this game. I like them even more than the first game. They definitely took kind of that cel-shaded look to make it look more anime and more animated, I would say. Obviously, this being an older game, the animations are not amazing, but there's a lot better animation in Dark Cloud 2 than in the first game. I also love that it is a bright and colorful game. One thing I've always believed is that those bright, colorful anime-style games, they tend to age better than the hyper-realistic games of the time. Okay, so to wrap this up, there are definitely things that I enjoyed about Dark Cloud 2, but unlike Dark Cloud 1, it's a lot harder to recommend Dark Cloud 2 unless you were really a hardcore fan of Dark Cloud 1, simply because they kind of botched a major system in the game. Botching the Georama system, I mean, the whole game suffers from that, quite frankly. Once I saw how convoluted and unneededly complicated it was now, I was far less interested in doing it, but I had to keep the game going, to keep the story going. So I gotta say, I'd recommend it if you are a hardcore fan of the first game, but if you weren't, then you're totally free to skip it. Okay, so in the comments below, why don't you tell me of a sequel that botched major important mechanics from the first title. And as always, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button. And if you like what I'm doing in general, share, subscribe. Have a good one.